Hi there, I'm the_twig and I like analysing game rules. To my knowledge, there is only one mechanic in ONE D&D which has seen a major change in every single Unearthed Arcana. In this video, I'll be going way too deep on Unarmed Strikes. To give you a full understanding of Unarmed Strikes, I'm going to need to talk about them at various points in the ONE D&D timeline. As such, I'll be saying which UA each mechanic relates to, and if it was changed or removed, when. I'll also put these codes in the bottom right to help you keep track of what I'm talking about. For example, if a rule was brought in Character Origins and changed in Druid and Paladin, I would show this in the corner. I think that this is probably going to be the first of two videos, the second of which I will make when the Monk gets released. This video will cover the generic mechanics of Unarmed Strike to date, and the Monk video will give a top-up for whatever new rules come out, as well as talk about the actual tactics that you could use if you decided to make a Monk character. First though, a little bit about Unarmed Strikes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. In 5e, there is one thing that is more important than anything else in making a playstyle viable. Synergies. These are mechanics that work together to produce additional effect. One of the most obvious ones is a rogue using a finesse weapon, like the correctly pronounced rapier. This synergy allows the rogue to use sneak attack. A more complex synergy, but one that I'm sure almost all of you will have seen before, is a paladin using a halberd or glaive. The paladin can use Great Weapon Master to add plus 10 damage, minus 5 to hit, Polearm Master to get a bonus action attack, and because it's a melee weapon, they can even use Divine Smite to add extra damage dice. Let's have a look at the synergies of the Unarmed Strike. Monk's martial arts allows them to use dexterity for their unarmed strikes and makes the damage dice an actual dice instead of just one. Several races allow you to use a d4 or even a d6 for your damage die, although this doesn't stack with martial arts, you have to pick one or the other. Tavern Brawler also gives you a d4, which still doesn't stack, and lets you grapple as a bonus action after you hit with an unarmed strike or an improvised weapon, which is probably just as good if not better than your unarmed strike. That's basically it. Smite doesn't work, sneak attack doesn't work, and there's barely any feats which synergize. Not even a moon druid can offer any synergies, because natural weapons aren't unarmed strikes. Most magic items also apply to weapons, not unarmed strikes. In fact, I don't think that there is an official magic item which gives more than a +1 to unarmed strikes. Even on a straight monk, until you reach level 11, you probably want to attack with a quarterstaff or spear as often as possible, only using unarmed strikes on your bonus action attacks or flurry of blows. In my opinion, unless you're an 11th level monk, using your action to make an unarmed strike is probably the single worst thing you can do in 5e, simply due to the opportunity loss of using a better weapon. Even if you are an 11th level monk, there's probably something equally good, if not better. This is the starting point for unarmed strikes. Even if you disagree with me about them being the worst, I hope that you will at least admit that they are far below average. Right from Character Origins, Unarmed Strike got a rewrite. Now when you hit with an unarmed strike, you can choose to do one of three things. Deal 1+ strength damage, as normal, shove the target either 5 feet away or prone, or grapple the creature. In this version, both shoves and grapples are also attack rolls. This was later changed in Druid and Paladin, where it becomes a strength or dexterity saving throw, but I'll talk about that later. Before discussing the impact of these changes, I want to quickly point out that you can make an unarmed strike with any part of your body. It could be a kick or a headbutt. You don't have to punch. The only exception to this is grappling, which specifically states that it requires an empty hand. Also, I just want to go on a slight tangent. You can make an unarmed strike against any target within your reach. This prompted me to look at the reach weapon property, because I'm a pedant and constantly on the lookout for loopholes. Fortunately, the reach weapon property only increases your reach when attacking with the weapon, or triggering an opportunity attack with the weapon. So holding a glaive does not let you punch someone 10 feet away. The fact that reach has a capital letter suggested to me at the time that this was going to be a term which was going to be modified by multiple things, and may even make it into a future rules glossary. However, as of Druid and Paladin, this line about reach was removed. Now, the elephant in the room. Shoving and grappling is no longer based on athletics. This has received a fair deal of criticism, because it used to be impressively easy to just pump your athletics with things like expertise and advantage to make grappling and shoving basically guaranteed. Dedicated grappling builds are definitely weaker now. However, I don't think this is actually that much of an issue. In my experience, and in the testimonials of pretty much everyone I've asked, grappling builds were incredibly uncommon. While this change does lower the ceiling for grappling builds, it also raises the floor for non-grappling builds, as you now no longer need a proficiency for them. This is a tend to the middle. It makes unarmed strikes viable for everyone in melee combat, and I think that's a good thing. There is one really major unlock that these new unarmed strike rules give though. You can now grapple and shove as an opportunity attack, which you couldn't do before. To understand why this is so important though, I think it's best if we first look at the grappled condition. So let's pause, look at that, and then come back to unarmed strikes as opportunity attacks. Second of the major changes in character origins, the grappled condition. This received a fairly significant buff and a fairly significant nerf, both of which I think were positives. While grappled, your speed is 0 and can't change. You have disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the grappler, and the grappler can drag or carry you, but the grappler suffers the slowed condition while moving unless you are tiny or 2 or more sizes smaller than the grappler. Don't worry about the slow condition, this was removed in Druid and Paladin, so treat this as every foot of movement costs 1 extra foot. There was some extra nuance, but I'm not going to go into it because it was niche and no longer works. If you want to know more, watch my movement video, although it is now redundant. Lastly, while grappled, you can make a dexterity or strength saving throw against the grappler's escape DC at the end of each of your turns, ending the condition on yourself on a success. The condition also ends if the grappler is incapacitated or if something moves you outside of the grappler's range without using your speed. I'm going to talk about escape first, because this is probably my favourite part of the character origins grappled condition. In D&D 5e, escaping from a grapple required you to use your action to make an athletics or acrobatics check, contested by the grappler's athletics check. This was very bad action economy, and it was also quite common for there to be near unbreakable grapples. Now, I'm basically a forever DM, but it's time for the hot take. On the average table, this was a bad thing. The reason for this is that on the average table, monsters grapple players far more than players grapple monsters. A few weeks ago I did a poll, and here's the results for that. The reason for this is because almost anything with tentacles, pincers, or an especially big mouth will have something saying, if you hit with an attack, the target is grappled. Ruining the player's action economy is less fun for the players, so less fun for the table. The thing that this automatic end of turn save does is prevent players from having to use their actions to escape. The pushback against this is obviously that grapple and shove builds become a lot worse. You can no longer force enemies to waste actions attempting to escape from your plus 13 athletics grapple. Builds like this were a significant minority however, so I don't think that retaining grappling prowess is worth the cost that the action escape has on the rest of the player base. I am however going to now explain why it's also not as bad as you think. The escape is at the end of the creature's turn. This means that they still can't move unless they use their action to prepare a dash action, in which case they probably wasted their action anyway. Grappling is still a movement lockdown. The only difference is that now the grappler needs to occasionally spend attacks, not actions, to re-grapple. Also, if you did want to spend your action to attempt to escape from a grapple, you actually still can. All you do is make an unarmed strike against the grappler and attempt to shove them 5 feet. This will break the grapple and even put you out of range of their opportunity attack, so they can't re-grapple you as a reaction. Unfortunately, this was reverted in Druid and Paladin, so that escaping now requires an action again. I personally hate this reversion, and it's my least favourite thing about the Druid and Paladin UA. The other thing that is new for grappling is the attacks affected section. Grappling is now a de facto taunt mechanic. By grappling someone, you are near enough forcing them to attack you instead of your teammates, both by proximity and by disadvantage. This is actually huge. It means that now almost everyone has some situation where grappling an enemy is a good idea. There is a really weird pedantic reading of attacks affected however. Because it says you have disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the grappler, you could interpret this to mean that you can never have disadvantage against the grappler. I think it should be fairly obvious that this is not how the grappled condition is intended to work. Finally, I'm going to talk about the movable part of the grappled condition. But to do that, I'm actually going to show the Druid and Paladin version, just because it's a little bit clearer. While dragging a creature, every foot of movement costs 1 extra foot. This is pretty subtle, but mechanically it's a wonderful change. In 2014, you didn't spend extra movement, your speed was halved. What that meant is if you had 30 foot speed, you could run 15 feet up to a creature, grapple them, and then be unable to drag them because you've already used movement equaling your 15 feet of speed. Alternatively, if you started your turn grappling a creature, you could drag them 15 feet, let go, and then continue walking another 15 feet because you have your full 30 feet of speed. This was silly, and the change in movable fixes it. Now then, while we're talking about grappling, let's jump forward in time to talk about the updated Grappler feat. Hi there, Editing Twig here. Sorry if you can hear the roadworks. I'm about to say some stuff about the 2014 Grappler feat. I didn't realise until right now, but it actually gives advantage on attacks against grappled enemies. As such, some of the stuff that I say isn't strictly correct. The 2014 version of the Grappler feat has to be one of the absolute worst feats in D&D. I actually think I've seen more people take the Weapon Master feat. ONE D&D's Grappler feat is a different story, however. This thing is quite good. First up, you get +1 to Strength or Dexterity, which is always nice. As for the bulk of the feat, Attack Advantage. You have advantage on attack rolls against a creature grappled by you. Fast Wrestler. You aren't slowed when you move a creature grappled by you, provided that the creature is your size or smaller. Punch and Grab. When you hit a creature with an Unarmed Strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also grapple it. You can use this benefit only once per turn. Punch and Grab is lovely. It means that once per turn you don't have to waste an attack doing no damage. This just significantly decreases the opportunity cost of going for a grapple. Again, don't worry about the slow condition of Fast Wrestler. This now just means that you don't spend double movement while dragging. Attack Advantage is the real cream of the crop here though. This means the Grappler doesn't just give you a defensive advantage and a strategic positional advantage, it also gives you an offensive advantage. Getting all three of those together from a single attack which also does damage is actually ridiculous. If you're playing any sort of melee character who doesn't have a shield, I would consider getting this feat. The new weapon swapping rules mean that you can stow your weapon, grapple the enemy, and then start hitting them at advantage with a single-handed weapon like a longsword, all in one turn. Overall, this is a fantastic feat. Now, after that actually quite long aside, let's return back to Unarmed Strike and talk about opportunity attacks. I think that there are three main uses for this, although the third one technically doesn't work rules as written. I'll explain why afterwards. So, first scenario, you're playing a fighter with a greatsword. An ogre runs out of your reach, proccing an opportunity attack. You don't think that you'll be able to kill them with a single attack. Instead, you use your opportunity attack to make an unarmed strike with an empty hand. You can hold your greatsword in one hand while not attacking. And if you hit, you grapple them. The ogre can no longer run away from you. This is probably the most obvious upshot of the opportunity attack unarmed strike. Every character who has a free hand now has a pseudo-sentinel feat. If you don't have a hand free, you can still shove prone, requiring the enemy to spend movement equal to half their walk speed to stand up. The second scenario is more teamwork based. In this scenario, you're playing the wizard, and your friend is playing the fighter with the greatsword. For whatever reason, you're both standing next to an ogre on the front lines, although your only weapon is your quarterstaff, which will do 1d6 -1 damage. The ogre moves away, proccing an opportunity attack from both of you. You think that if the fighter hits, they will definitely kill the ogre. It doesn't matter if you hit or not. You will have no material impact on the outcome of this if you just attack with your quarterstaff. Instead, before the fighter makes their opportunity attack, you make your opportunity attack and attempt to make an unarmed strike to shove the ogre prone. If you are successful, then your fighter friend will have advantage on their opportunity attack, making it considerably more likely that they will get the kill. By making an unarmed strike instead of a quarterstaff attack, you went from having no material impact on the outcome of this turn to improving the chances that your friend will get a kill. Obviously, this particular scenario was somewhat contrived, however I hope that you could think of some similar scenarios where something like this could have happened. Now for the third scenario. As I said, this one technically doesn't work, but I think most TMs would be willing to allow it anyway. I'll explain why afterwards. So, it's the first turn of combat and your friend, the fighter, wants to charge in and attack the ogre. Unfortunately, they're 35 feet away and can't quite get in range to hit the ogre, so they would have to use their action to dash, or probably more optimally, dodge. However, instead of this, they move towards you and then away from you, proccing an opportunity attack. You then use your opportunity attack to make an unarmed strike and shove the fighter 5 feet, which means that they can now get in range of the ogre and use the attack action. Obviously, as a wizard, your unarmed strikes are unlikely to hit the fighter's AC, so to help you out, the fighter will close their eyes as they run past, which temporarily gives them the blinded condition, so gives you advantage. They then open their eyes again after the opportunity attack. By doing this manoeuvre, you have effectively used your reaction to give the fighter a full attack action. Unfortunately, this doesn't actually work, because as per the 2014 PHB, an opportunity attack must be made against a hostile creature. We don't currently have ONE D&D rules for opportunity attacks. I'd certainly allow this at my table though. It's called teamwork, and it shows that the players had initiative to work out that they could do this. Hell, I'd probably even give inspiration the first time they pulled this off. ONE D&D has one other Unarmed Strike related feat that I think many people have forgotten about, and it's in character origins. Tavern Brawler is a first level feat, so you can get it at first level from your background. The furniture as weapons point isn't relevant here, but the other 3 features all affect Unarmed Strikes. Enhanced Unarmed Strike lets you use a D4 instead of a D1. As always, this isn't especially interesting. It still doesn't stack with the myriad ways of getting damage dice on your Unarmed Strike. Damage rerolls may have something interesting, but probably not. This allows you to reroll Unarmed Strike damage dice when you roll a 1. That's a plus 0.4-ish to damage per attack. It gets slightly better if you have a larger damage die. The potentially interesting thing here is that unlike most other sources of damage rerolls, such as Savage Attacker, Unarmed Strike is an action, not a damage source. This means that rules as written, you can reroll all dice involved in that Unarmed Strike. As of Druid and Paladin, Divine Smite and the Smite spells can be used on Unarmed Strikes, so you should be able to reroll all of those ones as well. Side note, Raw, Divine Smite is currently a separate damage instance, so it wouldn't work. However, Jeremy Crawford has said on camera that this is a mistake. Rules as intended, it is still the same damage instance, so it should work. I don't think that this rerolling of Smite is intended, however. Another feature which also specifies an action, not a damage source, is Fighting Style Great Weapon Fighting, and there is a sage advice saying that this is not intended to reroll Smites. Sage advice is not raw though, it is a mixture of raw clarification and rye, and this tweet is definitely one of the latter. Finally, shove is probably the most interesting point. When you hit with an unarmed strike, it allows you to both hit and shove the target 5 feet away. Note that this does not allow you to shove the target prone. Shoving away is unfortunately probably the least useful effect of unarmed strike, so this isn't great at face value. However, this is now a free shove. Telekinetic is a pretty good feat from Tash's Hideous Laughter, and I think that this could be comparable. It isn't ranged, but Tavern Brawler's shove does deal a little damage in addition to its effect. There is one other use for this shove, which is actually quite powerful, but I think I want to save it for the monk video. As a quick hint, we're going to chokeslam some dudes. Overall, I don't think that this feat is fantastic, but if you are planning on doing a lot of unarmed strikes anyway, and you're a player who likes tactical positioning, it's certainly worth considering. Expert classes didn't have any direct changes to the unarmed strike feature, but there were several other features which impacted it. The main one was the Grappler feat, which I've already talked about. However, another big one was the new movement rules. These have now all been removed as of Druid and Paladin, so I won't give an in-depth explanation, but literally every character who wanted to grapple now wanted to climb speed. If you want to know more, go watch my movement video. The last main thing from expert classes is the attack action, specifically the equipping weapons section. This has had a slight rewrite in all subsequent UAs, purely for the sake of clarity, so I'm actually going to read the Druid and Paladin version. This is exactly how it worked in expert classes too, it's just clearer. You can equip or unequip one weapon before or after each attack you make as part of this action. If you equip a weapon before an attack, you don't need to use it for that attack. Equipping a weapon includes drawing it from a sheath, picking it up, or retrieving it from a container. Unequipping a weapon includes sheathing, stowing, or dropping it. So, even if your hands are full, as part of your attack action, you can now unequip a weapon and go for a grapple. Pretty much anyone can grapple at any time now. Moving on to the cleric and revised species, there were 2 big things for unarmed strikes, and both were in that species section. The Goliath is probably the best species for a grappling character. There are a ton of amazing things. Going for the biggest fish first, large form allows you to become large as a bonus action. This means that you can now grapple creatures of huge size as well, which is quite honestly huge. Powerful build gives you advantage on saving throws to escape grapples. This doesn't really benefit your offense, but as previously stated, monsters grappling players isn't infrequent. Giant Ancestry, however, really lets you specialise your grappler. You choose one option from a list, and can do that thing proficiency bonus times per long rest. For my money, there are 3 good options. Cloud's Jaunt is a bonus action 30-foot teleport. Great, but not beneficial to unarmed strikes. Stone's Endurance is actually quite good. use your reaction to reduce damage you take by 1d12 plus con. As a frontline grappler, you're probably taking a lot of hits, so a little extra longevity is always welcome. My favourite for an Unarmed Strike grappling build, however, is Hill's Tumble. When you hit a large or smaller creature with an attack roll and deal damage to it, you can knock that target prone. Consider this in combination with the Grappler feat. Proficiency bonus times per day, you can make a single unarmed strike against someone and immediately get them both grappled and prone. That is potent. The other species of interest here is the Ardling. Now, Ardling have been confirmed removed from ONE D&D. However, the Climber ancestry has something that I think is worth talking about anyway. The Climber is described as having hooked claws, sharp nails, or a serpentine tail, and this allows them to once per turn add their proficiency bonus to damage rolls for an unarmed strike, even if it's a reaction attack. If this was old 5e, this would almost certainly have just said that you can make an unarmed strike with a 1d6 damage die. Unlike a damage die bump, this proficiency bonus to damage does stack with basically everything else, including martial arts from the monk. This is actually really major. Now, if this is how they are going to be moving forward with the Unarmed Strike species, I am entirely in favour. I'm actually really hoping that we get another bestial species specifically for this feature. Or that Tavern Brawler gets an update which gives you proficiency bonus damage instead of the 1d4. If Tavern Brawler got that buff, I could confidently say that it is a good feat on Unarmed Strike characters. And finally, we get to the most recent UA as of this video, Druid and Paladin. This had a few changes that I've already alluded to, and a few that I've not talked about yet. First up is the change to the Unarmed Strike itself. The grapple and shove options are no longer attack rolls, they are now either dexterity or strength saving throws. I'll link two analyses by Reddit users Guyblade and Exorcist in the comments, but as you can see here, this actually makes it slightly easier to grapple the average enemy until you get to CR 16. I'll put my hand up right now and say that this is not what I expected, and in my last video I actually hypothesised that the opposite would be true. While I'm on the subject of my takes from the last video, I said that I was probably very softly against this change. You lot in the comment section have changed my mind. I am now a fan of saving throw grapples. The practical change here is that grappling and shoving are now slightly better in the neutral game. However, it is much harder to get advantage or disadvantage on them. This is also a further buff to Tavern Brawler, which now allows you to either shove as a saving throw or as an attack roll. Grappler probably does similar, however the text in that feat says you can deal damage to the target and also grapple it. Strictly that means that you now need to both hit and have them fail a saving throw, which is obviously a nerf. Given that this is a rules glossary change though, I would probably run it as you can deal damage and the target is also grappled by you. Weird clashes like this are part of the playtest process unfortunately, and we kind of have to just expect them and make our best guesses to how the two mechanics are supposed to work together. I've already talked about the change to the grapple condition in Druid and Paladin, but just to remind you, it now requires an action to escape again. Pretty sure I already covered why I don't like this change, so I'll just move on. Now, a big change. Divine Smite and all of the Smite spells can now be used on Unarmed Strikes. This is honestly huge. You may remember from my brief overview of the 2014 Unarmed Strikes that a bunch of features like Smite and Sneak Attack didn't work before. This is overturning that, which I think is amazing. Honestly, I love this mostly just because of what it stands for. Amongst Unarmed Strike has genuine multi-class synergies. These have always been so rare in the past, but here's a massive one right in the Paladin base class. Is it worth multi-classing for? That depends entirely on what the ONE D&D monk turns out to be. What I can say for sure though, is that ONE D&D has a really obvious way to use Hamon. The last thing to just quickly mention is the Circle of the Moon's Combat Wild Shape. The quick attack feature allows a wild-shaped moon druid to use Unarmed Strike as a bonus action. You can shove, grapple, and do all of that other fun stuff that I've talked about in this video. So, I think that Unarmed Strikes have made a massive recovery from the absolute bottom of the barrel option that they represented in 2014. Whilst they take some careful build decisions and some tactical play, Unarmed Strikes are now highly potent. Just to prove it, here is a graph comparing the damage of a fighter using Polar Master and Great Weapon Master, and a monk using Tavern Brawler and Grappler. No fancy tactics, no key, nothing like that. Just pure attacking as often as possible. Up until 11th level, when fighter gets their third attack, the monk is pretty much lock and step with the fighter, except that the enemy that they are attacking also ends up grappled, and the monk has a 5-foot shove whenever they want to use it. Now though, I want to look forward and give a quick wish list for future changes to the Unarmed Strike. First up, I want them to bring back some way to once per turn add proficiency bonus to Unarmed Strikes. I think that my ideal for this is for it to be in the Tavern Brawler feat, as that would give you the freedom to pick any species you want. But if they made it a species feature, then that's fine too. Second up, please revert the Druid and Paladin grapple condition changes so you no longer need to spend an action to escape. It destroys the game's action economy, and the free end of turn saves were a really nice soft nerve, which I think makes the game much more dynamic and fun. Third, let's talk about Monk's martial arts. I think that there are two main things to consider here: damage die scaling and the bonus action attack. Damage die first. If you had asked me a year ago how the martial arts die should scale, I would have said 1d4 at first level, 2d4 at 5th level, 3d4 at 11th level, and 4d4 at 17th level. This would give Monk a smaller damage bump at low levels where they need it the least, but a large damage bump at high levels where they need it the most. Now though, Unarmed Strikes are a lot better, so I don't think that they need that much of a buff. Instead, I would like to see each die increase by one size compared to the 2014 Monk. That means d6 at first level, d8 at 5th level, d10 at 11th level, and d12 at 17th level. This is a much more modest increase, but I think that it balances out a lot better with the rest of the classes. Now for the bonus action Unarmed Strike from martial arts. The light weapon property got a really good buff in ONE D&D, where the additional attack no longer requires a bonus action. I've got a full video about this if you want to know more. Monk should get something similar, and I think that this is actually basically guaranteed. However, if this happened, a monk could get a free Unarmed Strike and a free light weapon attack on the same turn. I feel like this is probably too much. Instead, my current hope is that martial arts has a line saying that unarmed strikes and monk weapons can be treated as melee weapons with a light and finesse properties. This does a few things. First, it means that the additional attack is baked into the Unarmed Strike, but prevents the monk from getting both a free Unarmed Strike and a free light weapon attack. Second, it would mean that Unarmed Strikes are considered finesse weapons. This would mean that they could work with things like Sneak Attack and Hunter's Mark, and anything else which specifically calls for a weapon. Oh, monks also need to have their dexterity be the DC for grappling and shoving, so please don't forget about that, Watsy. While we're talking about monks, let's quickly go over my wish list for them. I would really like to see a complete overhaul of the key system. I've seen some cool things where you have a smaller pool but it recharges every combat, or one where your key recharges at the start of every turn. I don't think that this is really on the cards though. As such, for a more realistic wish, I want the amount of key required to do things to be reduced, and in some cases just not require key at all. Step of the Wind, for example, has no reason to require key. Finally, I want monks to have something special that only they can do. The Barbarian can Rage, the Rogue can Sneak Attack, and the Paladin can Smite. What can the monk do? Anyone can punch. Sure, the monk is slightly better at it, but that's not a unique thing. Anyone can get bonus action attacks too. They get Stunning Strike, but that's not until 5th level. I want a new, uniquely monkish ability. Not something that they can do better, something that only they can do. Actually, final thing, I kinda want monks to not be called monks. Unless you're willing to reskin, that name basically requires you to be a bald Tibetan guy in a robe. Call them brawlers or pugilists or something. Anyway, that's it. Unarmed Strikes are no longer terrible. I'd probably even call them good, although I think that we need to let the rules settle for a while and let the collective internet mess with them before we can make that statement outright. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and all that, and in particular, please share this video with your friends. That's the absolute best way to help me, and it will also help more people understand ONE D&D's rules. Hopefully I managed to finish this video before the next UA dropped. That one is apparently going to have all 6 warrior and mage classes in it, as well as the change to the weapon properties. That's an insane amount of content, so I'll probably be doing several brief overview videos of all of that, and then I'll likely go deeper on the monk, because I'm really excited to see what they do with it. Bye!